Hi, I'm Duncan, and I'd like to talk to you about the different approaches, methods, and techniques that you studied in your text. Now, in your text, it stated that many people believe we're in a post-methods era, so that's why in this video, I'd like to use a few of my ESL and EFL experiences to connect to the idea of a post-methods era to help you better understand what that means. The first experience I'd like to share with you is my experience teaching in a first grade sheltered ESL classroom in an elementary school in Kansas. There I was teaching in a sheltered ESL classroom, so that means that all of my students were English language learners, but I had to teach the regular curriculum of the other classrooms. So in this classroom I used a lot of content-based instruction. I had to teach the curriculum. So I taught subjects like math, science, social studies, but I supported their English language needs. Another example is task-based learning. One example of this is when I was teaching science. I did a seed sorting activity where the students had a bunch of different seeds, they sorted them into different categories, and then they matched those seeds with the names of the plants. So they had to finish a task by the end of the activity. I also used a lot of multi-sensory learning in this classroom. One specific example was when I asked students to create something out of clay. They could be really creative and think of something interesting to create. Then I asked them to list different activities to describe what they had created, and then finally they wrote a story including a lot of that description, all of those English words that they had learned. I also used TPR in this classroom. Every day we worked on the alphabet and different sounds, and we would have the students act out the different letters through TPR activities. The next experience I'd like to talk to you about is my experience teaching in junior high schools and some elementary schools in Japan. Now, when I was there, I was an assistant language teacher, so there was a Japanese teacher who was the main language teacher, and I was there to help out mostly with listening and speaking. So in the classroom, I tried to use a lot of the communicative approach. The Japanese teachers used a lot of grammar translation and the audio-lingual method, but when I was solely in charge of an activity, I used only English and tried to interact with the students in English only. I also tried to get them to interact with English outside of the classroom, so I created an interactive English-only bulletin board for them to see in the hallway. I also used the direct method a lot in junior high school, but a lot in the elementary schools when I was there. I used a lot of pictures and taught vocabulary directly through those pictures. Also, TPR is great for the elementary classrooms that I was in. I used that a lot to teach classroom vocabulary and action verbs especially. Another example is when I used project-based learning a lot in the junior high school. One specific example was when I was in charge of an English club, and one of our activities was to make Christmas cookies because they wanted to learn more about American culture. I created a simple recipe in English, and we followed it together and completed the project of making Christmas cookies together. The last teaching experience I'd like to talk to you about is when I was teaching in an intensive English program at a university in Colorado. So in this program we had students who were hoping to gain entrance to the university, but their proficiency standards weren't quite high enough yet. So in our program we used the communicative language teaching approach because we wanted our students to learn listening, speaking, reading, writing, and grammar through context and only using English. I also used task-based learning when I could. One specific example of this was when I had a basic English class, so these were beginning level students, and we decided to take them on a tour of the university's gym. It's a very nice gym. And so before we went on this tour, we had these low-level proficiency level students write down questions so they could be interactive during this tour. And that was their basic task to complete. I also used a lot of project-based learning when I was teaching through context. So when I was teaching an advanced reading and writing class, I had the project of having students research nonviolent resistance. So this was an advanced class, and it was an advanced topic for them. We talked a lot about this topic. We watched videos, we read articles, they learned a lot about it, and ultimately they had to choose something that was happening in the world today that you could classify as nonviolent resistance, and they had to write about that in an essay. That was the project that they had to complete. I also used multi-sensory learning when I could in my classrooms. The students learned through a lot of musical activities. I used pictures and brought in realia when I could. I also used cooperative learning in the classrooms, and this was because all of these students wanted to go to university, and at most universities in the US, professors ask you to work in groups a lot of times. So one example was in a listening and speaking class, I had the students group together based on hobbies that they had in common. So one group, maybe they liked skiing, or another group really liked reading, and they had to give a group presentation about those hobbies. So they had to cooperate and work together. By hearing my examples of my different experiences in various classrooms, I hope that you can see how I differentiated between different approaches, methods, and techniques in order to teach according to the philosophy of my employers, while incorporating my own ideas of best practices in the field. I hope you consider this post-methods era in your future classrooms.